So there's some exciting news. Tomorrow morning I will be featured as a part of a Muslim focus group on CBS's This Morning, where we were basically answering a bunch of questions about politics, about religion, personal beliefs, basically anything and everything that ignorant people who don't know Muslims want to ask us, I mean. So it was really interesting. I had a couple of afterthoughts walking after the whole thing happened. So first of all, I just want to say that Frank Luntz was very, very cordial, and I really appreciate the fact that he had brought Muslims together, I think for the first time as a group on the media to express their raw, unfiltered thoughts. Now, of course, it's not a representative sample by any means. I mean, we are, after all, New Yorkers, and so there was a sampling bias there, but I do think that some of the voices that were chosen are very important to be heard. The things I just want to talk about is the importance of how questions are framed to Muslims. It's something that I don't think we pick up on very much. As Muslims, I think we're just so used to being fed these lead-in questions where we are expected to just give an answer. And the questions themselves are so biased. So it's kind of like if you're going to ask a biased question, you're going to get a biased answer, right? So here's an example. So in order to be on this, in order to be a participant in this focus group, I had to fill out a survey. And the survey was asking me, how outspoken am I, and what are my thoughts on Donald Trump, and who did I vote for, and stuff like that, right? Then there was this one question that was like severely problematic, and it said something to the effect of like, oh, what percentage of Muslims do you think are dangerous terrorists or like potentially can become radicalized? And I was just like, are you serious? Are you serious? Like, you're actually asking me that question. First of all, do you even realize how offensive that is? That's like me asking white people on a survey, how many white people do you think are gonna just up and shoot somebody? And, oh, by the way, give me a percentage. I want you to, like, straight up get a calculator and look up the number of white people in America and then calculate a percentage off of that and then write it in this little, nice, tiny little box, right? It's just so ludicrous. And you know what? I feel like I left my math skills down because I was like, man, if there's 7 million Muslims in America and then, you think about the statistics of that, I was like, oh, 0.0001%. And then I realized that I did the math afterwards. Because I was like, oh, 0.001, 3 zeros and then a 1. I was like, that's got to be small enough, right? Like, if you want to be realistic or whatever. And then I was like, I looked it up. You know what 0.0001% is of 7 million? It's 700 people. I was like, oh crap, I just said that 700 Muslims could be radicalized. And that is nowhere near the number. I mean, honestly, I should have just put 0% because, first of all, who the heck am I? Am I like some fortune teller, first of all? I mean, I know I'm a public health professional and I'm supposed to know my statistics or whatever, but you're asking the wrong folks, first of all. Why don't you go ask those radicalists? Why don't you go ask ISIS? They're probably collecting data as we speak. So I was just thinking, this got me thinking that the way questions are framed themselves are very problematic. And so that had happened throughout the whole talk, and we were pretty good about calling him out on it, and he was very open to our criticism and our critical outlook of the way the questions were framed. I mean, if you think about it, the whole reason why we were even there was because there was this whole focus group on people's opinions on Trump and Islam and Islamic bigotry and Muslims and radicalized Islamist terrorists, all of that stuff. And I was like, okay, so we are basically a reaction to that group. We are basically on the defensive, as usual, right? As usual. Of course, you're going to have a white person do that. They wouldn't think ahead to actually be like, hey, let's give Muslims the mic first. They're the ones that are under attack. So it would make sense, right, for Muslims to go first. But no. I mean, still as long, I know I can be really critical of things, but here's the thing. We have been in the media and targeted for so long now, for over a decade plus, right? This is just, the heat of it and the intensity of it has been felt in the last 15 years, post 9/11. But it's been going on for a long time, right? And you would think that someone would have by now come up with this idea, and it still hadn't come up. Why is that? Oh yeah, because white people run the media. I mean, I looked it up. CBS in itself is not only run by a white male who is also Jewish and possibly Zionist, but also the major shareholder, right? The person who owns the majority shares of the company, and in essence is the owner of CBS News, is also white, male, Jewish, and possibly Zionist. So then it gives you, context as to why Muslims haven't had a voice. And I really, like I said, I applaud Frank because he's white, male, and Jewish himself. And he still gave us the mic. So let's see how it turns out. It hasn't been edited and sent on the media yet, so you might just see me really angry the next time I make a video. I'm coming literally fresh off of doing the group, by the way. So the way that questions are framed are actually more of an insight than what answer you give. So what I mean by that is, for example, when they asked us, how many Muslims do we think can be radicalized? That gives me more insight into the mentality of the person who wrote that question than whatever answer I would give. I mean, I could give the most random answer, and it wouldn't mean anything. But look at that question. Look at how that question is phrased. And that sort of thing kept happening throughout the focus group, right? So it kept happening, and it was like, oh, he asked me, how many white people do you think are racist? I was like, 99.9%. Honestly, I was going to say 95%, but then I was thinking about it, and I was like, look, if you actually do the math, which apparently I didn't do the first time, so now I got to say 99.9%. I was like, if you do the math, it's probably up to 99.9%. I mean, how many true allies, and I mean like white people who actually understand, like who actually truly understand the struggle of people of color, right? Like they actually know how to be an ally, right? That's a very, very tiny percentage of people. If you got whites are the majority demographic in this country, that's millions, hundreds of millions of white people. So if you take if you take 0.1% of that, that's thousands and thousands of people that I'm talking about who are actually not racist. And that's a very small group of white people, right? That you don't really have a bunch of white people who are actually not racist, because part of the problem is the structure is set up such that it empowers white people, right? So why wouldn't you have white people who are racist? And that's not to say, like I said, that white people who are racist are not nice people, because I've met plenty of racist folk, right, that are actually nice. I know it sounds kind of paradoxical, but on the one hand they're racist and on the other hand they're nice. So I mean, who would have thunk? But they exist, and the distinction that has to be made is that there's interpersonal racism that happens like between white people and people of color, and then there's internal racism, right? That's the stuff they're thinking up here, like, oh, they're probably thinking, of course this person is gonna take forever because they're black. When they're standing at the grocery line and they're like, oh, this person is a person of color and they're poor, so they're going to have to dig through their little wallet and find all the little petty change that they got left and pay for their food. That's the little stuff that's going on in their little noggins that they're like, yeah. And sometimes, sometimes it's not even conscious, right? So that's what I mean. That's what I mean by like white people being racist. Now, acting upon that racism, like I said, is what makes it interpersonal racism. But the common misunderstanding of what racism is that it's a personal thing, right? Like that people are racist. People are racist, not systems. And actually, the definition of racism is that there is a system in place that advantages the white people while disadvantaging people of color. And you're not going to find that definition in the dictionary because guess what? White people wrote the dictionary. So when you ask me a question that says, how many white people do you think are racist? And I say 99.9%. There's a reason why I said that. First of all, it's a leading question, right? So it's already a biased question because it's asking you how many white people do you think are racist. So you're basically saying, you're assuming that I clump white people with racists, that those are interconnected ideas. Which, I mean, is not a wrong assumption, but like I said, just to kind of explain the logic of it, it is, a biased question. So then you're going to get an answer that actually, like I said, the answer doesn't even matter so much as it matters how you frame the question. You frame the question that gives me insight into what you think of me, actually. So you're framing a question that makes it seem like I am going to target a group of people, blanketly target them, right? Like make a blanket statement, paint them with a single brush stroke. And one of the guys was like, yeah, you're doing the same thing that they do to us. But the thing is, when they do it to us, it affects us. It further marginalizes us. But when we do it to them, it doesn't affect them. For whatever reason, they're immune to it, right? Because they're in power. So it's not the same. It's not the same. And then when people say, like, they don't understand it when people are like, they don't understand when people of color are like, oh, you can't be racist if you're black. Why? I don't think a lot of people really understand that. Yes, you cannot be racist if you are black. Why? Because there is a system, right? If racism is a system where white is advantaged, then you can't have someone be racist against a white person if they are a person of color. So I don't want to get into this, but I guess I already opened the whole, what's it called? I opened the cat's bag or something. I'm really bad with idioms, my husband can tell you. Anyways, I opened something. So now I'm just going to say it. Let me explain Racism 101, everyone. So racism, yeah, it's all about, it's basically, let me make this analogy, which is what I usually make to people. Racism is like ableism, right? What is ableism? It's like the privilege given to people who are able-bodied, right? People who have all their limbs in place. They don't have any disabilities, sight, mental, or vision disabilities, or hearing disabilities, mental disabilities, emotional, disorders, anything like that. And so basically it's called able-bodied privilege. And what you have are people who are able-bodied. They're the ones making the laws, right? They're the ones who are in power. How often do you see someone who is a person with disabilities who actually writes laws about, like, hey, this is where people with disabilities need to park or whatever? I mean, like, it took able-bodied people to realize and recognize that people with disabilities exist in order for any of those laws to even take place, right? So like I live in New York right now, and I go onto the subway system pretty frequently, and there are rarely any elevators over there. Normally you have people who are able-bodied making the laws, so they don't have the lived experience necessarily of what it feels like on a day-to-day basis to live with a disability, right? So for example, let's talk about when I was pregnant. When I was pregnant, I actually had to go through a disability where I needed a wheelchair or some other form of assistance in order to walk or basically get around for a long time, for the latter half of my pregnancy. So I kind of had insight into what it felt like for a person with disabilities. I mean, I got out of the pregnancy. I wasn't so-called disabled anymore. But people who have long-term disabilities have to have this lived experience. So people with disabilities are not in power. They are not the ones making the laws usually. The majority of people who are making laws are people like me who are able-bodied people and do not have any sort of lived experience with disabilities on a day-to-day basis that affects their lives every single day. And when you have someone like that who is making laws based on their understanding of the world, which to them, there's no real barriers, right? I mean, they go on to the New York subway, they climb up the stairs, they go up and down the stairs, they walk everywhere, they don't have any issues finding parking spots that are close by to the doors of stores so that they don't have to walk a lot. They don't have to think about, using the bathroom before they go somewhere. I have a friend who actually suffers from a bladder disorder. And, it can become like a humiliating issue because as a person with disabilities, you actually have to think about things all the time, right? You have to think and plan and manage your day and think about how you're going to strategically go about your day with this disability. Right? Because not every place caters to you. When I was working at the Council on American Islamic Relations, they didn't have an elevator in the building. They had 2 staircases in order for me to get to the office, and I was pregnant at the time. And I was like, yo, come on, like, you guys are like civil rights and all this. Why don't you guys have an elevator? Isn't that like a violation or something? Because people with disabilities should be able to access any building in any room. And they were like, you know what? The law said something or the other. The law said something along the lines of if your building is pre-1980s, then you are exempt from the disability law that basically requires you to have an elevator. And so I was shocked. I was thinking, oh my goodness. So basically, if someone were to roll in here with a wheelchair and they were a very important figure, right? Like they were like a major spokesperson for, let's say, the Democratic Party or something, but they had a disability in which they had to use a wheelchair on a daily basis, you would not be able to accommodate them. I mean, obviously they would accommodate the person and they would probably find a venue that would, suit the person appropriately. But the point I'm making here is that a person with disabilities has to have the lived experience on a day-to-day basis and think about these things that people with able bodies do not have to think about, and that is called able-bodied privilege. In the same way, people of color have to think about these things every single day, and that white people do not have to think about that. I have to think about my safety when I walk down the street with a hijab on. White people don't have to think about that. White people don't have to feel like they're going to be targeted at any given moment by the police and racially profiled and then sent to jail, even if they're innocent. They just don't have to do that. And when you think about it, when you say that you cannot be racist against a white person, let's tie this all back together. It's like the same thing as a person with disabilities. Here's a person with disabilities and here's an able-bodied person. It's basically like an able-bodied person saying to the person with disabilities that, oh, you are ableist because you said so-and-so things about me having able-bodied privilege. And then the person with disabilities is like, how can I be ableist against you? You are the one who makes all the laws. You are the person who is literally ableist, right? You can't have someone who is marginalized be an ist against the oppressive power. And that is why you cannot be racist against white people. So let's just get that clear, because I'm gonna be talking about this a lot probably in all my videos. So the point I'm making here is, again, that when I say that 99.9% of white people are racist, it's because they don't have that lived experience. So they may have racist ideologies, they may be back here in their head in a little cave that just never comes out. But then every once in a while, they might actually think something that is racist. And then every once in a while after that, they might actually act on something that's racist. And every once in a while after that, they might actually say something that is racist. And so that all comes out because they have this internalized racism, internal racism, racist thoughts. So when you put it all together, I feel like if that soundbite airs on national television, that a lot of white people are going to hate me. And I just wanted to say that, look, y'all can hate me all you want, but you do not understand how racism works. I have had to explain this to so many white people. It is overwhelming. People think that racism is all about interpersonal racism when it's at a very systemic level. If you want to look anything up, look up mass incarceration, look up racial profiling. None of these things that affect white people. They just don't. So my point is, when I'm being asked a question that is very biased and is basically has the intention to make me speak my mind, but not in a good way. Like, I'm not allowed to speak my mind in order to show who I am and what I believe. I'm given the mic to expose my true, most inner thoughts that are basically going to be sensationalized by the media, right? So it's like a battle. You have to choose like, should I actually say what I think, or should I censor myself because I'm going to be on national television and everyone's going to hate me and everyone's going to think I'm racist. Well, you know what? This is why I made the video, and this is why I think it's really important for people of color and Muslims to have a voice and to actually own the narrative. This is why I'm doing this video tonight before the video airs, so that people can actually understand what I said, why I said it, and what context, how I said it, under what context. So, come on, Muslims, you of all people should know what it feels like to have what you say out of context, put out of context with the Quranic verses and whatnot. So anyways, I do hope that you all can send me some suggestions about topics later on. And I just wanted to thank you for the people who have sent me feedback on the videos. I have been trying to think about them and implement them. So take care. Assalamu alaikum.